Hello everyone, it's Tracy. Welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me. So today I'm making a frame pull-up card. Here is what the card looks like on the outside. And this is the inside of the frame pull-up. So let's get started. From Concord and 9th I'm using the Lovely Blossoms Turnabout stamp set. And from Burniston I am using the Frame Pull Pop-Up 1070. I've got the stamp set up here in my MISTI and I'm using my Distress Oxide ink pads in Rusty Hinge, Peeled Paint, Walnut Stain and Broken China. And I go ahead and I stamp those on a 6x6 piece of card. As I've mentioned before in previous videos, Concord and 9th do have on their website comprehensive instructions on how to use turnabout stamps and how to set them up in your stamp positioning tool. I go ahead and I stamp 2 of those 6x6 card pieces so that I have 2 backgrounds to use. Onto the card base I'm using a brown cardstock 4x4, which is 8x4 opened out, and I get these 2 frames from the die set and cut them also out of brown cardstock. It leaves a nice wood grain embossed effect too. These 2 dies in the Frame Pull Pop-Up die set are called Smiley Square and Smiley Tab, and I go ahead and cut those from 80-pound Nina Solar White cardstock. I also go ahead out of brown cardstock and cut another tab so I can get the brown arrow. Here I am burnishing the folds on Smiley Square and Smiley Tab, and the folds are all valley folds. They all fold in. I'm applying glue to where the arrow pull tab is, and on this part I don't put glue all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see why shortly. And now I'm going to glue that brown arrow in place. And it matches in with my colour scheme that I have chosen. It's time now to attach Smiley Tab to Smiley Square. And you can see I've positioned it behind Smiley Square and applying glue to the Smiley Tab and pressing it down in place onto Smiley Square. You can just see underneath there is another square that has been die cut, and that goes on top of Smiley Square and Smiley Tab, which I will go ahead now and glue on. Karen Burniston does have a YouTube tutorial for this die set on her YouTube channel, and I shall link that down below. And she can explain these things a bit better than I. This is where you can see the mechanism working. Back to my backgrounds here, I'm going to work on the base card, and I've cut one of the backgrounds down to 3 3/4 by 3 3/4 so that it fits onto the 4x4 card and has a nice border edge. And I'm going to glue that down with Gina K Connect glue. I'm taking my time here to make sure that I'm aligning this up correctly and that it's straight. And because I used glue, I've got the wriggle room to be able to move it around before pressing it down into place. Moving on here, and I get the mechanism and I line it up on the base card where I'd like it to go, and I get a pencil and mark either side of the pull tab because I want to cut a notch on the base card so it's easy to pull the pull tab down. And I'm just using a circle die that I've got in my stash, and I'm lining it up there, and I take it away and die cut it on my die cutting machine. And you can see the notch there, and that's going to make it easier to pull the pull tab. I'm just rubbing out my pencil lines, and I'm putting this in place to make sure that I'm happy with how it's looking. I go ahead and I put glue just in these bottom corners on the back of the mechanism, because you wouldn't want to put glue over the whole back, otherwise nothing would move. So I'm just gluing that down, making sure it's got a good hold, and you can see when I pull the tab, the flap comes up. Just making sure everything's straight. And then the top part there just tucks in under the pull tab, nice and neatly. Moving on here, and I bring in the brown frame that I cut earlier, and I'm just positioning it on the front of the frame pull-up. The smaller brown frame I have here as well, and that will have a white square attached to it later. I've got my Distress Oxide ink pad here in Rusty Hinge, and I've also cut another frame from the die set by nesting a couple of the other dies together to create a smaller frame to go inside the brown frame. as I'm demonstrating here. I'm not sure that I'm loving the rusty hinge colour, so I'm having a think about whether I'm going to keep that. And I go ahead and I do the same thing with the Broken China Distress Oxide ink pad to see if I like that better. And here I am, I'm comparing the two, and I decide that I'd like to go with the Broken China as I like the look of that better. And I glue that white square to the brown frame. With this die that's in the die set, I use that to cut from the background that I created, and that becomes the layering pieces for the inside of the frame pull-up. And you can see I'm just positioning those in place now. Just using liquid glue here and pressing it down in place. Once it's stuck down, I do give the pull tab a try to make sure it's all still working. Moving on now, and it's time to glue these frame pieces down. And I'm applying glue here, but not on that top edge of the frame. Karen suggests not to do that, and she explains why in her YouTube tutorial, but it's essentially so that it doesn't hinder the way the mechanism works. So I'm just gluing that inside frame in place. Once I've got all that stuck down and in place, I do give the card mechanism another try, which I do several times throughout the video to make sure that the paper knows what it's got to do and that the mechanism gets used to being worked. It's time now to work on the pop-up on the inside of the frame pull pop-up, and this little die creates the piece you need to create that pop-up. So I'm just folding along the score lines, and I'm going to position this in place. I put some glue along that top piece there, place it in the centre best I can, press it down, make sure the glue's got a good hold, and put glue on the top part, and then fold the top down onto it and press it into place. And when I open it up, you can see that little platform inside there, and that will be where I attach this frame to. So I just put some glue on the front of that pop-up piece, or the platform, and press the frame into place. Push it down, make sure it's got a good hold. Onto the front of the card, and I'm using from Karen Burniston her Flowers and Bee die set 1026 to cut out some flowers and leaves. It takes me a little while to do this, so I stop recording for a little while, and when I pick up the recording you can see that I have the flowers in place where I'd like them. I have some rhinestones here from my stash, and I'm going to adhere them to the centre of the flowers. Also, you can see some dragonflies in the picture. They are brads, but they are not in place yet. I've decided to remove the split pins from the back of the brads, as it's going to be too bulky on the card if I leave them as brads. You can see there to the left I have the Tiny Words stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, and I went ahead and stamped out Just For You in the walnut stain ink, and also inked the edges of the sentiment strip. I'm now adhering some 3M Scotch foam tape to the back of the sentiment, and I'm going to put this in place on the front of the pull-up. So the front of the card says Just For You. I went ahead and stuck the dragonfly brads down with some hot glue. I put 2 on the front and 1 on the inside. I also went ahead and finished decorating the inside frame, as you can see here. I'm now working on a secondary sentiment to go on the inner pop-up. I cut an oval from brown cardstock with an oval die that's in my stash, and I'm just positioning that in place, and I put a white oval on top. I'm using a Happy Birthday stamp from Concord and 9th's Bits and Pieces stamp set. I have actually cut the stamp in half so that I could stack the happy on top of the birthday. I'm using the Distress Oxide ink pad in the walnut stain to stamp out the Happy Birthday so that it all coordinates with everything else I've done on the card. So I'm happy with how that's stamped out, and I use double-sided 3M foam tape to stick that white oval on top of the brown one. So I'm just taking care here to line it up, make sure it's straight and in the middle. Once I've got the sentiment stuck down there, it's time to give the card another test, making sure it's working with the embellishments and such on the card. So you pull the pull tab, the frame pull pulls up, revealing the inner pop-up, and the inner sentiment. When you're closing it back down again, that top piece tucks in under the arrow of the pull tab, nice and neatly. For the inside of the card, I use a piece of cardstock 3 3/4 by 3 3/4, and I also go ahead and cut a notch out as well, and then glue that piece down, as you can see here. So we have our frame pull-up card, and it also opens up to write a personal message on the inside. I'm very happy with how this card came out. I had so much fun making it, and I do enjoy making interactive cards. I enjoy the challenge of it, and I especially enjoy the end result when I'm finished. Like, I'll never get sick of pulling that pull tab to make that frame pull up, revealing the pop-up on the inside and the sentiment. And the other thing about these die sets from Karen Burniston, she usually makes them so that they're generic. You can make the card for anyone, for any occasion. So that's always a big plus for me. Don't forget to check the description box below for the links to the products I used. Head over to my blog, there'll be an entry there which explains the challenge that this card was made for. And if you'd like to subscribe to my YouTube channel, I would really love that too. Thanks very much for watching today. Have a great day. Bye for now.